What you're about to witness isn't just another military exercise. It's the moment everything changed in South Asia's delicate balance of power. For decades, we've watched as India and Pakistan maintained a fragile equilibrium, punctuated by occasional skirmishes. But something has shifted. The recent demonstration of the Indian Navy's long-range precision strike capabilities represents a dangerous inflection point that few recognize for what it truly is: a fundamental transformation in India's military posture and willingness to project power. What we're witnessing is a critical breaking point in regional deterrence. India's naval power hasn't just evolved, it's metamorphosed into a force capable of delivering devastating strikes deep within enemy territory with surgical precision. What happened behind closed doors that triggered this unprecedented display of naval firepower? What invisible red line was crossed in the tragic Pahalgam terror attack that left 26 civilians dead? And most importantly, what does it mean for you, for regional stability, and for the future of warfare in South Asia when a nuclear power demonstrates its ability to strike with impunity? By the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment changes everything, and why what happens next will redefine the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. The Arabian Sea churns beneath the steel hulls of Indian warships. On command, multiple missile systems activate simultaneously. Within seconds, the horizon illuminates with fiery contrails as precision-guided missiles streak toward their distant targets. The simultaneous, coordinated firing demonstrates not just technological prowess, but a level of operational readiness that sends an unmistakable message across the border. This wasn't a routine drill. This was a calculated demonstration of power and reach. What I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you understand the escalating tensions between nuclear-armed neighbors. These anti-ship firings weren't just about testing weapons systems. They were about signaling India's readiness and resolve to conduct long-range precision offensive strikes in the wake of the deadliest terror attack on Indian soil since the 2008 Mumbai massacre. The restraints are off, and the world is about to understand what happens when a nation with India's military capabilities decides that deterrence through demonstration has become necessary. For years, we've watched a pattern: terror attack, diplomatic response, temporary tensions, then a return to the status quo. But something fundamental changed with the Pahalgam attack that left 26 civilians dead. A breaking point has been reached that's transforming India's entire strategic posture. The question isn't just why these missile firings now, it's what comes next. What calculation has been made in New Delhi that prompted this dramatic display of naval power? And what happens when Pakistan, itself a nuclear power, decides how to respond to this unmistakable warning? You know that feeling when something precious is violated? When innocents are slaughtered and the world expects you to respond with mere words and symbolic gestures? That's what's happening in India. Not one, not two, but 26 civilians murdered in a single terror attack in Pahalgam. Families destroyed, children orphaned, communities traumatized, and evidence pointing to cross-border support for the perpetrators. For years, India has responded to such provocations with strategic restraint. Diplomatic channels, international pressure, economic measures, all while grieving families buried their loved ones and asked why more concrete action wasn't being taken. There's a special kind of national anguish that builds under restraint. It doesn't dissipate, it concentrates, it hardens, it transforms. Every attack that goes unanswered becomes another brick in a wall of resentment. Every civilian death becomes another reason to abandon measured responses. Every piece of evidence linking these attacks to foreign soil becomes another voice calling for decisive action. The pressure builds slowly, imperceptibly at first, then faster, until the container can no longer hold what's inside, until restraint itself becomes politically unsustainable. Sometimes the most dangerous military postures aren't immediate, they're calculated. They wait, they plan, they gather resources, position assets, identify vulnerabilities. And when they finally emerge, they're overwhelming. Not just in force displayed, but in message delivered. What changed in New Delhi wasn't the capability to respond, it was the willingness to demonstrate that capability openly. The breaking point wasn't about a single attack, it was about crossing the threshold where patience transforms into preparedness for action, where diplomatic response gives way to military readiness. To understand what's happening, you need to understand both the military context and the geopolitical backdrop. The Indian Navy isn't just any maritime force. It's rapidly evolving into one of the most sophisticated naval powers in the Indo-Pacific region. With aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and advanced missile systems, India's naval capabilities now extend far beyond coastal defense. The recent demonstration featured multiple warships conducting anti-ship missile firings simultaneously, a complex operational task that few navies can execute effectively. These weren't just any missiles, but likely included variants of the BrahMos system, a supersonic cruise missile developed jointly with Russia that can strike targets up to 500 kilometers away. The geopolitical context is equally important. The Pahalgam terror attack on April 22nd wasn't just another incident in Kashmir. It was the deadliest attack on Indian civilians since the 2008 Mumbai massacre. 26 tourists were killed, including an Indian army officer. India has directly pointed to cross-border linkages, diplomatic language that unambiguously accuses Pakistan of involvement. In response, India has already announced a series of punitive measures, including suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, closure of the Atari border crossing, and downgrading of diplomatic ties. Pakistan has responded by closing its airspace to Indian airlines and suspending all trade. The tension spiral is accelerating rapidly. Meanwhile, Pakistan's military has been placed on high alert, and there have been reports of unprovoked firing along the line of control in Kashmir on multiple nights. Indian troops have responded with appropriate small arms fire, according to military sources. Share in the comments if you've seen other situations where military demonstrations were used as a form of strategic communication during escalating tensions. But here's what most analysis misses. What's at stake isn't just Kashmir or even bilateral relations. It's the entire framework of deterrence in South Asia. It's about who sets the rules of engagement, who can respond to provocations, and who suffers when the established order breaks down. It's about credibility in a region where perception often matters more than reality. The pattern of naval demonstrations reveals something crucial that mainstream media is missing. These aren't just routine exercises. They're part of a calculated strategy to communicate India's evolving military doctrine. The official statement from the Indian Navy speaks volumes. The warships undertook these firings to revalidate and demonstrate readiness of platforms, systems, and crew for long-range precision offensive strike. The key word here is offensive, not defensive, not retaliatory, but offensive. This signals a potential shift from India's traditionally defensive posture to one that includes preemptive or punitive strike options. This revelation has three critical implications. First, India is signaling that it has overcome the traditional constraints of naval power projection. With missiles capable of striking targets 300 to 500 kilometers away, Indian warships can now target critical infrastructure and military installations without approaching hostile shores. Second, this demonstration wasn't just for Pakistan, it was for the wider international community. By publicly demonstrating these capabilities during heightened tensions, India is internationalizing its response options, preparing global opinion for potential military action. Third, and most concerning, these naval demonstrations complement other military movements, including the deployment of the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant. This creates a multi-vector threat that would be challenging for any adversary to counter simultaneously. What makes this situation different is the public nature of these demonstrations. Typically, military readiness is maintained quietly during tensions. The decision to publicly announce and show video footage of these missile firings represents a strategic choice to communicate capabilities and intentions clearly. The strategic chess game between India and Pakistan has entered a new phase, with naval power as a newly prominent piece on the board. Each missile fired isn't just about the immediate demonstration, it's about the strategic calculation behind it. The message to Islamabad, your territory is within range. The signal to terror groups, your sponsors cannot protect you. The declaration to the international community, we have options beyond diplomatic protests. What we're witnessing isn't just military exercises, it's the rewriting of regional deterrence. Most media coverage focuses on individual statements or incidents, missing the larger pattern. They report tensions, they show military movements, they quote officials, but they miss the strategic transformation unfolding. This isn't about individual platforms or capabilities. It's about India's evolving willingness to use its growing military power to enforce its security red lines. Is this just about demonstrating capabilities, or is there a larger strategy at work? The answer becomes clear when you analyze the comprehensive nature of India's response, from diplomatic measures to military demonstrations across all branches of service. This isn't escalation for its own sake. It's calibrated pressure applied across multiple domains simultaneously. The consequences of this evolving situation are already visible. For Pakistan, the strategic impact cannot be overstated. Their military has been placed on high alert, with particular attention to naval defenses along their coast. The psychological impact of Indian naval power projection reaches deep into Pakistani strategic thinking, which has traditionally focused on land borders and conventional forces. The Indian Navy stands combat-ready, credible, and future-ready in safeguarding the nation's maritime interests anytime, anywhere, anyhow, the official statement declared. Behind this clinical language lies a forced transformation that has been years in the making. This is the storm that changes the regional balance permanently. The ripples aren't just in military planning, they're in diplomatic calculations, in economic considerations, in domestic politics on both sides. They're in global security assessments, in maritime insurance rates, in international mediation efforts. Despite the overwhelming show of force, both nations understand the catastrophic consequences of all-out war between nuclear powers. The demonstration of precision strike capabilities actually forms part of a calculated strategy below the threshold of direct conflict, communicating capacity and resolve without crossing into actual hostilities. The humanitarian stakes cannot be ignored. The region is home to nearly 2 billion people, many living in poverty. Any military conflict would have devastating consequences, particularly for civilian populations. Water security, already a critical issue with India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, would become even more precarious. The question now isn't whether the demonstrations continue, it's what form they take next. Will India maintain this posture posture of heightened readiness? Will more capabilities be revealed? Will actual strikes be authorized if another terror attack occurs? And most importantly, how will Pakistan respond to this new projection of Indian naval power? We've reached an inflection point in South Asian security dynamics. The age of Indian strategic restraint, a paradigm that has defined its approach to cross-border terrorism for decades, appears to be evolving into a more assertive posture that includes demonstrated readiness for military action. The positioning of Indian naval assets isn't coincidental. The guided missile destroyer INS Surat recently fired a medium-range surface-to-air missile against a sea-skimming target in the western Indian Ocean. The aircraft carrier INS Vikrant is deployed at sea. These aren't just routine movements. They're statements of intent and capability. The future implications extend beyond current tensions. Watch the evolution of India's maritime doctrine. Watch military procurement priorities, particularly anti-ship missile systems. Watch naval deployment patterns in the Arabian Sea. These are the indicators that will signal whether this represents a temporary escalation or a permanent shift in India's security approach. The world is recalibrating to a reality where India is increasingly willing to demonstrate military options in response to security threats, where precision strike capabilities provide new response options below the threshold of full-scale war, and where naval power plays a growing role in regional deterrence. Comment projection. If you believe India's naval demonstrations represent a fundamental shift in its security doctrine, or posturing if you think this is primarily about managing current tensions without significant long-term implications. Your perspective matters in understanding how this emerging situation is perceived. This isn't just geopolitical analysis, it's understanding the forces that will shape security dynamics in one of the world's most populous and nuclear-armed regions. The nations that correctly assess India's evolving military posture will better navigate the changing strategic landscape, while those who dismiss these demonstrations as mere flexing risk strategic surprise. Subscribe to understand the forces reshaping South Asian security, while others remain fixated on headlines without context. Join a community that sees beyond individual incidents, that recognizes strategic inflection points before they become conventional wisdom. In my next analysis, I'll reveal how India's naval modernization connects to its broader Indo-Pacific strategy and relationship with the Quad, a perspective that few are discussing but everyone concerned with Asian security should understand. The decisions being made now in naval headquarters and defense ministries will shape regional dynamics for decades. The strategic choices made today will echo for generations. Will you understand them as they unfold, or realize their importance only after they have already transformed the geopolitical landscape? One final thought. Watch carefully how India balances its naval demonstrations between the western coast, facing Pakistan, and its eastern fleet, facing the broader Indo-Pacific. The allocation of assets tells a story that official statements never will. Defense planners understand what many analysts miss, that in the evolving security environment, India must maintain credible deterrence toward Pakistan, while simultaneously developing capabilities for its wider aspirations as an Indo-Pacific power. The balance struck between these competing priorities will reveal India's true strategic calculus more clearly than any public statement.